I'll try that. Great. Can you see,
I
can
see
everybody
it.
see that? Okay, great. Fabulous. Thank you so much, everybody, for your patience and for being here today. I'm really excited about this topic, and it's kind of new to me in the sense that I am not an expert. I have a long history in the field of content strategy and site design, and I have been kind of working my way up the ladder, learning more about accessibility. And so I'm thrilled to be able to speak about it a little bit, especially right now, as I think that it's become suddenly so much even more relevant to many people. And so I want to focus today just on talking about a couple of small things that people who are responsible for websites and web applications can do right now to help a lot of people. So I am Carolyn Shannon. I'm the manager of technical documentation for Pantheon. That means I manage pantheon.io/docs. I have experience in information architecture, content strategy, usability, and I come from a municipal webmaster background and have been in the field for pretty much as long as the web has been around. It's definitely changed a lot over the years, and I am excited to be able to extend what I know in technical documentation writing and extend that to helping improve the accessibility of all of our products and our documentation. I am part of the internally part of the Pantheon Accessibility Work Group, which started this year, and our goal is to help make Pantheon's products and content as available and easy to navigate as possible, and also to extend out and help other people understand why it's important for both for the individuals that it serves and also as a practical and strategic value. We do important work for people and make things easier, and that aligns with my role as the manager of technical documentation. Technical documentation exists to help people be successful, and so this is near and dear to my heart. I'm very excited to be able to be working with such excellent people and doing this work. Digital accessibility work has more urgency right now. It's always important and it's always urgent, and it forms a important background to design work that people do and compliance work that people do. But right now, suddenly more people are online, and a lot of those people are people that don't traditionally work from home. Just this week, Verizon's CEO reported that web traffic is up 20% on Verizon's network, and VPN traffic is up 30%. So what that means is that millions of people who have never worked remotely before are navigating websites that they've never used to figure out how they're going to work and connect with family and friends and get news and apply for unemployment benefits and other kinds of programs. So those kinds of things make our user personas as we design websites and our user stories much more diverse than ever before. And so as people are filling out forms and doing work online, we have opportunities to help them. Just this week, COVID Access Info on Twitter, which is a brand new Twitter account, started sending out information with people to try to help and remind people that providing information via social media, not everybody can read the text that is shared in an image, a GIF, or a video. So add transcripts and links, and let's work to make the information accessible to everyone. And that was in response to some of the things that are being put out. So right now, people are working very hard to create information and get it out there, create emergency websites and get them out there. And we have an opportunity to help guide those efforts and make sure that everyone can interact with them and use them and see them. So our work becomes much more important now, kind of than it has for a much larger group of people. So that kind of extends what we commonly already understand, which is that accessibility work helps more people than we might think, right? So the standard, there are definitions of what counts as disability. There are permanent disabilities and temporary disabilities and situational disabilities. These apply to a wide swath of our communities, and they appeal to the work that we do then can appeal to not just people who we might traditionally think as being the beneficiaries of accessibility work, for example, people who have cognitive disabilities or visual impairments, but also people who are ill or distracted or new parents and are going online and working in ways that maybe they haven't been doing before. So accessibility work that we're doing right now is helping a very large swath of the people that are online that maybe don't traditionally go online or are going online in a fashion that requires more flexibility from our content and our websites. So this work that we're doing is really important. So how can we help? And what should we do first? So first we have to understand that accessibility work that we're talking about and making things available and usable for the maximum group of people is part of universal design. And universal design is resilient design. What that means is it bounces back, it's future-proof, it flexes, and it makes it possible for large groups of people, even groups of people that we maybe haven't anticipated in our personas and user stories, to interact with our content and use it. We also have to remember that people visiting our websites right now, in particular, may be stressed, they may be overloaded, they may have children, in addition to, or they may have other challenges that make interacting with our content more difficult. So we want to make it easier for them to succeed online. I want to introduce the concept, which most of you are probably already familiar with, which is a digital curb cut. So in 1971, disability rights activist Ed Roberts went to the Berkeley City Council meeting and asked for modifications of curbs to accommodate wheelchairs. Ed Roberts is a California hero and was very active in the inclusive design and inclusive use community, and did a lot of work to advocate for inclusive design, and his work to create curb cuts along with a bunch of other things eventually led to Steve Jacobs in 1996 making a statement about electronic or digital curb cuts. The idea that Steve Jacobs was getting at was that that when we make universal, when we make accommodations and inclusive to create universal designs that remove barriers, we can, the things that we create tend to benefit more people than we might anticipate. So for example, curb cuts, physical curb cuts allow for strollers and other wheeled vehicles and provide benefits for many, many more types of users than were originally strictly designed for. So accessibility improvements that we do can be seen as kind of digital curb cuts that provide immediate value to much larger groups that we may not even anticipate or think about, but also provide provide a strategic value to our organization because they provide additional ways to work with our content that we may not even anticipate right now as we're designing the content. Oops. So digital accessibility, let's talk about what accessibility is a little bit. So digital accessibility follows the World Wide Web Consortium's guidelines for that they have established and developed for working with website and web application content. The current standard that's out there is the WCAG 2.1 standards that align with 4 kind of high-level principles for the way that content should ideally behave, and how our content should, and how our sites and applications should behave. The first one being perceivable, so that information is presented in ways that users can perceive. That means that it's not invisible to all of their senses, and that's an important principle that then has been extended into particular specific techniques. The second is operable, and that just means that you can operate the interface. It doesn't require interaction that the particular user cannot perform. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about today is definitely falls into that that supporting category. The third principle is understandable. So information has to be understandable, and the operation can't be non-understandable. So for example, you need to be able to know when looking at a button what it does and how it works. And then finally, robust. Content has to be robust, that it can be interpreted reliably by a wide variety of user agents, including different kinds of assistive technologies. So, and as technologies and agents evolve, the content should remain robust enough to continue to be usable by future agents. So those are the 4 kind of standard principles and that we understand and use to guide our accessibility improvement work. So we have lots of good tools out there now for and checklists for testing our website and content accessibility, and there are quite a few good checklists that will walk through the WCAG 2.1 accessibility guidelines and give us a list of things that we can improve. One of the biggest challenges, though, is where do I start? So as a person who is not an expert at accessibility, but is trying to make improvements, one of the things that I came into that came up for me right away was where do I start? There are so many potential things that I could do, and I want to do them all, but I can't. I don't have a place to start and don't know where to do work that will have the the maximum impact. And so in thinking about this problem as I started working on it, I went back to knitting. So I'm a knitter, and I have a picture of a knitting needle with some knitting on it on the slide that shows some what happens when you increase in your knitting. So when you add one stitch, it changes the trajectory of the knitting and changes the shape of the knitting. And so this particular talk is very constrained, and it's going to focus on 3 things that I think will provide kind of the maximum bang for the buck for those who are getting started and trying to get their feet under them in doing improvements. And so I'm just kind of this is by way of my encouraging you to just start where you are. It's not going to be perfect, and just make one thing better, and focus on the things that have the broadest impact, and then keep going. And if you do that, then soon it will change the shape of the work that you're doing, and will will make a really meaningful impact. So let's talk about the 3 key accessibility improvements that I've found, I think, based on the reading I've done and the research I've done, that can be a great place to start. This is not, again, it's not exhaustive. I'm not going to cover everything, but I think these are really good places to start doing accessibility improvements that will have broad impact. So the first one is alternative text for images. The second one, and we'll walk through each of these, second one is video captions or transcripts, and the third is keyboard navigation. Let's see, I'm trying to. So the first text alternative is text alternatives for images. So the WCAG guidelines specify that it's good to provide text alternatives for any non-text content so that it can be changed into other forms that people need, such as large print, braille, speech, symbols, or simpler language. And the best way to get started doing that is simply by going through your site and your content and determining whether or not there are text alternatives and adding those. The standard way to do that for websites and web applications is to add alt attributes in your HTML tags, or ARIA labeled by attributes. It's also a good idea to provide text alternatives for things like ASCII art, emoticons, and things like that. We may not think of doing that, but it helps to provide an alternative explanation for what people are presented on the screen. The second key improvement that really helps a lot is one that we're actually not doing for this particular video, and where my organization is actually working to do that. This is something that we're currently undertaking an initiative to do, which is provide captions or transcripts for time-based media. And what that means is for video and audio content, providing an alternative way to consume that content. So for video content, you can have open or closed captions, and for audio content, you can have transcripts, and you can also have it in overlay in multimedia content, or you can have it in a separate space. There are a lot of different ways to produce captions or transcripts for time-based media, and these are things that not only help people interact with the content in multiple ways. For example, they can read versus having to have their audio on, but it also improves the SEO for that particular content if you can include a textual based representation for that time-based media. At the bottom of the, I should have mentioned at the bottom of the of each of the slides, I've provided links to guidelines, the guidelines for the World Wide Web's WCAG website for each of the sections. And then finally, keyboard navigation. Keyboard navigation, according to the WCAG guidelines, all functionality of the content is operable through a keyboard interface without requiring specific timings for individual keystrokes. This can be, there are a bunch of different things associated with this category of usability and accessibility. One of the common ones that's used right now is skip to content links in HTML that allow people to skip the navigation links tabs and get achieve focus specifically on the main content area. Another one is focusing on walking through and testing your site or application to ensure that you can tab through the content, especially the menu. It's one of the things that we ran into when we started doing this work was we were surprised about the tab order when you create content. It may or may not work the way that you intend. And so doing actual manual testing, tabbing through the content, especially menu items, is very valuable and can help you reorganize the content in a way that makes it possible to move through with using only the keyboard. And then finally, another way to help orientation and navigation is to use structured headers, header tags, and content tags. This is slowly also being supplemented with HTML5 tags that identify navigation and sections and articles and things, but we're still kind of in transition there with different levels of support. It's worth looking at moving to that, but we're not quite there yet with universal support for that. Finally, I just wanted to make one note about compiled web applications. So JavaScript web applications or single page apps are kind of a special use case with regard to how they vary in navigation techniques. And so when we're talking about keyboard-based navigation and skip links, they're implementing it, different single-page applications are implementing this in a variety of different ways. Client-side routing, what they use what's called client-side routing, and it kind of introduces some new challenges. And so Marcy Sutton, who works for Gatsby.js, did some research with recently on the number of different client-side navigation techniques that were being used to try to identify which ones, if there was one that was better than the other. And again, so this area is kind of evolving. So as you do accessibility improvements, it's worth, if you're working with single page applications or compiled applications, it's worth really evaluating carefully how navigation works on the client side, and identify if the particular compiled application framework that you're using is capable of doing things like creating skip links or maintaining focus as you move through, as the user interacts with the environment and the application. So that's basically the kind of the overview of the 3 top things that I think are best for giving you the most bang for your buck when you're getting started doing accessibility improvements. I think that providing alt tags and captioning, and then making the keyboard and focusing on keyboardable navigation. Those 3 things will provide a lot of bang for your buck, and give you a good kind of framework for improvements that will help you get your website or application in it to a good place quickly, and provide the foundation for the next set of improvements to your site. Just as one last thing, I wanted to include. I wanted to include a couple of resources on what to do next. One of the things I've been learning about accessibility work and inclusive design, universal design, is that providing a framework for this to be comprehensive and sustainable is really important. And if you're doing accessibility work in your organization already, you know that it requires you to be a bit of a champion and build and do some culture building in addition to the actual work. Building a sustainable practice that includes testing and includes inclusive design, universal design, so that things are accessibility considerations are built right in up front, requires a bit of cultural building an inclusive culture. So I've included a couple of links to different things that I think might be helpful as you do that work in building inclusive culture in your own organization. And I would love to hear if you have any suggestions for things that have worked for you, or resources that you find particularly helpful. And that's what I've got. So.
Thank you, Carolyn. That was very informative. Does anybody have questions for Carolyn? I'm just curious, what really got you interested in accessibility?
Yeah, thank you. So I got interested in accessibility because as a documentarian, I'm a helper by nature. As I said before, people who write documentation are people that are trying to help others be successful in what they do. And so as I've worked with content strategy and user stories, and it became kind of a natural extension. I've been at, and I also have a background in municipal web design, and we have in the government space very clear guidelines for accessibility. And so when I moved to Pantheon, it I brought all of that experience. I brought all of that experience and the desire to help to this space. So when I started reaching out to learn more about Pantheon's own accessibility work and initiatives, I found a lot of people that were trying to do different things, and we all started kind of meeting and pulling together, and the accessibility work group was born. So it's been a great it's been a great experience so far, but it's definitely a process.
Oh, Chaz, you just mentioned that. Chaz, do you want to talk about that? Oh, wait. I need to unmute. Let's see. Hang on a second. I'm going to oops. No, wait. Mute all. Hang on a second. Continue. Okay. Chaz, can you unmute yourself? Yes. Okay.
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that's my first time using the microphone on my webcam. Yeah, like YouTube provides automatic captions in English, and they're great for getting the timing right. And they've been getting better and better, but they still make interesting mistakes. And it's really important, if you're going to use those, to follow up with it before you make the video public and go through it and have a proofreading session where you use YouTube's tools to make corrections so that the captions actually reflect what is being said.
Oops, Carolyn, I just accidentally muted you, I guess. Hang on. There you go. Okay, start again.
Oh, I was going to say, thank you, Chaz. That's a great point. As we rely on technology to automate some of the work that we're doing, there are definitely going to be gaps. And so automatic captions may get us most of the way there, but we still have to carry it home and review what we're doing. And that's true for most of the accessibility work that we're doing. For example, you can run lighthouse tests to run through and provide automatic reports and a score on accessibility of your site. And automated testing is certainly worthwhile, but it's definitely not comprehensive, and it's no substitute for keyboarding, using a keyboard to walk through your site, or doing focus testing with users to understand how the language that you're using or the buttons, labels that you have are being interpreted. So great point.
Keep going, Chaz.
Yeah, I actually have a follow-up on that. I've noticed that Microsoft Office products now seem to be providing automated captionings based on image recognition. And again, the problem that I'm noticing there is that they give very general responses, and if you have an image in a document where you're trying to get a particular message across by including that picture, it's really important to go back and replace that description so that it's communicating what you are trying to communicate with that image, particularly if it's not reflected in the text, the actual text on the content.
That's a great point. So Chaz, it sounds like you have a lot of experience walking through that. Do you have tips on how to review that content? Do you just sit down and walk through it? Do
Well, the issue for me has been I'm a webmaster and I have lots and lots of duties. And at one point in the past, I was responsible in our organization for checking certain documents. And it just took up so much of my time. So I would say the thing is get somebody in your agency who can focus on that and doesn't have other duties that they need to, take away from. Because it's this is important, and it is important that I keep the website working and well organized, and that people, so I do go, if I see something, I do go back to people and say, hey, if you do this, it will make it easier for blind people. It will improve our search engine rankings. But realistically, everybody has to take responsibility at their end for checking the documents that they're putting out and making sure that what you put in the alternate text is getting across the message you're trying to get across with the image. That is putting out the same message.
Yeah, which is why I added that. That's so true. That's why I added that little section at the end about the work of building awareness and building inclusive design, universal design culture. A lot of the work, I think, of accessibility is education, because everyone is busy, and if it's not built in and awareness isn't there of the benefits of the work, then a lot of things will just not get done, because everyone is wearing multiple hats. So that's a very good point. Any other questions? Doesn't look like we have any other questions. I really appreciate you taking time out of your afternoon to talk about accessibility. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
And thank you